Hey there, Jim Johnson for Accent Help. And I wanted to talk about 3 skills that American actors need to learn for doing an RP, received pronunciation, or standard British, an RP accent that are actually really great for them to bring back into all of their work, whether they are doing something that's a little bit more like relaxed generican, a little bit the way that I'm talking now, or whatever it is they're working on. I think there are 3 big elements of RP intonation that are incredibly helpful. Okay, so RP, received pronunciation. This is that sort of RP, standard British, high-end, posh British accent, right? Well, I think there's a modern RP that's a bit more like this. And right now I want to focus more on the classic RP sound, something that's a little bit more along this line here. So in working on that kind of classic RP, some of the big intonation elements that American actors need to work on, one of them is simply taking whatever their pitches are that they're operating on, so whatever their pitches are that they're operating on, and to take the higher pitches and be willing to go much higher, and to take the lower pitches and be willing to go at least a bit lower than what they might in their own speech. Because in general, there's a much wider sort of pitch range that gets covered. And I think that bringing that back into your own work can be something that makes you much more expressive. So I think this spreading out of our kind of habitual narrow pitch range is a great skill for actors to bring into all of their work. Another thing that I think is really great that's much more necessary in RP is that as Americans, we like to almost punch every other word. Like we really like to stress a whole lot of words. So it's almost like I'm stressing a ton of words. So it really, is pretty heavy with that. Well, I'm going to suggest most of the time, I don't think we also make a big difference between these. So I want to create a bigger difference in the stressing that we do with them. And I also want to separate them more, much like that. But I also want to really focus on elongation in these ones that we use. And I also, if anything, I want to get rid of a bunch of these stressed words, because in RP, it's very common to not stress nearly as many words as what Americans do. In RP, it's not nearly as common to stress nearly as many words as Americans do. In RP, it's not nearly as common to stress as many words as Americans do. And actually having fewer operative words, fewer stressed words, can make you clearer, because then people know what to listen for. Now, I think especially also if you can elongate those stressed words, that can be one of those things that makes you much clearer and easier to understand as well, instead of just punching it and moving on, because things that are fast are a little harder for the audience to hold on to. So picking and choosing your operative words and letting them play with length a little bit more, in addition to playing with pitch, I think those are very important things. The final thing that I want to mention is what I like to call the American clunk. So Americans tend to go along and then just clunk at the end. And I like to think of this as an airplane crash. And what you need to get in the habit of is trying to break out of putting a period all the time in the middle of things. And those periods that just drop off all the time. That would not be appropriate for RP, right? Now, it doesn't mean that everything has to end upwards. It actually means that you can actually go down, but when you go down, it shouldn't be a crash. It should be more of a landing. There's my landing. This is the end of the phrase. And bringing that back into your own speech to say, this is the end of the phrase, as opposed to, this is the end of the phrase, where we almost pull the energy out before we get to the last word. That kind of American clunk, as I like to call it, just kills off the energy. And it's at the end of the phrase, you're putting much less vocal energy into it. And oftentimes we completely lose the last, which is kind of handy because it may not really carry any. So you don't even need to, because we know what you're going to write. So I think that's part of why we take the energy out of it. But this is the note that you may get, that is, you need to stop dropping line endings. You may have especially heard that if you're working on Shakespeare or something. But these are also the same skills that are going to serve you much better for audiobook work. These are the things that are actually, I think, going to serve you for doing some camera work over clunking all the time, where it just collapses. Besides, then you're going to give into my pet peeve on camera, where I can tell that somebody's speaking so quietly that the person they're talking to in the scene can't even hear them. Please stop that. For more info on learning accents overall and adding things like this to your toolkit, check out accenthelp.com.